Hey everybody, welcome to week 3 of class. Wanted to make a short video to tell you a little bit about this week's work as well as talk about some of the ideas from last week's discussion and how that plays into our work this semester. So to start off, I've got week 3 pulled up here and I just wanted to talk about levels of questions. You'll need to review this before you start the discussion board. So levels of questions is a way of flipping our thinking as students, because usually you are used to being given the question and you provide the answer as a student. Okay? This time, levels of questions, the students, you guys, actually ask the questions and then respond to each other. Okay, so the levels of question assignment here outlines this exactly what it is. It's a lot more engaging, a lot more interesting, a lot more focused on what you guys find important in the readings. What I wanted to point out, you'll go ahead and have time to read this by yourself, but what I wanted to point out was that there's 3 different levels of questions and that our work is going to focus on level 2 and level 3 questions. Those are a little bit higher order thinking. Questions that you really should be pushing on each other to deepen your thinking, broaden your perspective, and really engage in that discussion, because that is going to be the meat of this class, is our discussion around literature and ideas. And I want to put it on you guys to bring those ideas, to ask those questions, and bring that to the forefront. So this is really student-centered driven discussion. So review that carefully. Let me know if you have any questions on it. Again, it's a little bit different framework than what's typically given, that you guys are now posing the questions and answering one another rather than having me pose the questions. So that is levels of questions. I'm going to jump back into our class here, and I want to look at the discussion board from last week, because I think it's really cool to see how responses play into a few of our ideas this semester. One being the different themes we're studying for each unit. And this first unit, our theme is innocence and experience. And then secondly, how this plays into our critical approaches. And our first critical approach is reader response. So I'm going to scroll through here. I picked out a few specific posts to take a look at. It's really interesting to read everybody's response to the value of literature. Now, when I asked why many of you signed up for this class, many responded it was convenient, it was easy, it was online, it fit my schedule, I needed a humanities elective. All valid reasons, right? Kind of nuts and bolts reality of what this is. But I want to dig a little deeper into some of these responses, especially around our theme of innocence and experience, because we were all children once, we were all younger, we were all more naive than we are today. And so when we think about literature, we can think about how these themes are actually life. Okay, literature as exploring the human condition. And so I've experienced that theme, innocence and experience, coming of age. This is classic ideas around literature. So if we take a look at Karina's post, now Karina's going into the sciences, and so when she wrote about her value of literature, it fulfills a humanities requirement. Well, yes, absolutely. This checks off a box. And she says, I have no real interest in literature. And so when I think about that, I think, well, do you have an interest in human experience? Do you have an interest in the experience of others? And certainly, if we were going into science, biology, well, that's the human body, and I have a human body, so I should be interested in it, even if it's not necessarily what I'm drawn to. So those that think this doesn't relate to me, this isn't relevant to my career path, it's worth opening up a little bit and thinking, how does literature explore life? And when we do that, we start to see connections in places that might not have been so obvious before. Going back to our discussion board, Bethany also replied about how her most immediate goal is to pass the class. Good goal, thank you, Bethany. But also, the long-term goal that she can apply what she learned in future jobs, classes, and situations. And when we think about literature as life, reading the work of others, reading the experience of others can really broaden our perspective to the human condition. And that can be in our interactions at work, it can be in interactions with family members, but what it does is it puts us in a frame outside of our own, whether that's a frame of a different time period, which is what Marnie noted. Go to Marnie's post right here. Marnie talked about the value of literature as being able to see what it was like in someone else's time period. Yes, absolutely. But we can also see what it could be like in somebody else's current day setting. I live in rural Idaho. What is the experience outside of rural Idaho? So we can understand that literature and our reading can give us perspectives that we otherwise wouldn't have. And that helps us broaden our thinking, deepen our thinking, question our thinking, which is even more important, because sometimes what we read will confirm us, it will validate our experience, and sometimes what we read will push us, it will make us think differently, it will make us explore other belief systems and ideas. And that's really valuable when it comes to life and when it comes to work. One other post I wanted to point out, which was Audrick's, because Audrick pointed out how reading literature can help with writing. And so the value of literature there was improving writing. Absolutely. Because the more we can embrace literature as life, the more we can learn to express that in our own words, that we have the power to express our experience, our beliefs, our perspectives, just as others have done that in the literature that we read. So innocence and experience, it is a theme that crosses time, a theme that crosses places, a theme that crosses age ranges and demographics. So when we think about reading with that lens the next 2 weeks of this unit, really consider, what does that mean to me? What does that mean in my life? And that leads us directly into our reader response theory, which is the approach that we're taking for this first unit. Now, a number of students will be posting presentations on that, so you'll learn more about reader response through that. And I will post the first essay assignment, which is reader response, next week. Don't worry about it this week. I really want you to focus on your levels of questions and engaging in rich discussion online. And then we'll talk about the paper next week. But when we think about reader response prioritizes the reader's experience in interpreting the text. So reader response really sees reading as a relationship, a two-way street. It's not just a static text that is always giving the same message out to everybody. Reader response is, what is the text saying and how am I interpreting that based on my knowledge, my emotions, my experiences. It's text as relationship. Text is dynamic based on who's reading it. So one single text, one set of words can have 1,000 different meanings, 1,000 different interpretations based on who the reader is. So reader response prioritizes what the reader brings to the table and sees text or sees literature as being dynamic and relational depending on who the reader is. So as you move forward into this week's discussions and readings, make sure you're holding all of this. There's a lot to hold at one time, and we'll get more comfortable as we wrestle with ideas and thinking and the value of literature moving forward. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm here to help, and I look forward to the discussion.